Thank you for coming, everyone, and I'd like to officially welcome Mr. McLachlan, who is joining me today. A few weeks ago we announced, with the blessing of the Victorian Government, that we'd begun working on contingency plans for if the 2021 Toyota AFL Grand Final couldn't be held at the MCG. During this time we've had open and constant dialogue with the Victorian Government, and in particular Minister McLachlan, who I think I've hounded daily, and on most days even 2 or 3 times. The Victorian Government's support of football from community level all the way through to the elite is a partnership that the AFL deeply appreciates and allows our game to reach many people across the state on so many different levels. I'd personally like to thank Premier Daniel Andrews and Minister Martin McLachlan for that continued support. Throughout the last few weeks, as the pandemic continued to challenge us, we looked at all the possibilities around holding the 2021 Grand Final at the MCG. And I want to thank Stuart Fox and the MCC for their continued support of football and of us through this process. However, it's become clear as we continue to navigate through these challenges that it wouldn't be in the best interests of the community to host a grand final at the MCG this year in front of a crowd. It is now meant that for season 2021, the Toyota AFL Grand Final will be played in Perth at Optus Stadium. The match will be held on Saturday, 25th of September, at a time to be advised. The AFL has reached a suitable agreement with the Victorian Government and the Melbourne Cricket Club on amendments to this year's contract, taking into consideration the circumstances. To all Victorians, we will be back at the MCG, bigger and better in 2022. You have stuck by our game all year, and I know how hard it has been, especially how challenging it has been from a community football sense. It's been a tricky season, not only for the AFL, but for all your leagues. And I want you to know that a priority of the AFL to have you back up and running for next season, and you'll have our support. As we look forward to Perth, I'd like to thank Premier Mark McGowan and the West Australian Government for their partnership, not only for the Grand Final, but across the whole season. Season 2021 has proved to be really challenging on many fronts, and we wouldn't have reached this point without the support of all state and territory governments across the year. The announcement today gives us the clarity and time needed to deliver the competing clubs and fans the best grand final experience possible, whether that is in stadium for those in West Australia or through the Channel 7 broadcast for millions of fans around the country and indeed the world. West Australian footy fans are as passionate as any in the country, and the stadium in Perth, with a capacity crowd of 60,000 in attendance, will be an amazing spectacle. An AFL operations team will soon be based in Perth after completing quarantine, and will work with the West Australian Government on the upcoming plans, with further details to be released in coming weeks. Thanks for your support, and I'll now hand over to Mr. McLachlan.
Thanks, Gil. As Gillon's indicated, this morning we finalised an agreement for the relocation of the AFL Grand Final from the MCG later this month due to the ongoing impact of the pandemic. Wouldn't be responsible for us to risk the health of Victorians by rushing back to crowds at a point where it's not safe to do so. And of course the AFL, in an environment where the Grand Final is only 3.5 weeks away, does need clarity and certainty so that they can get on and organise it. So it's a decision that is in the best interest of football. I've said all along we would not seek to hold the AFL to an arrangement to play a grand final in front of an empty stadium. It wouldn't be right for the game, it wouldn't be right for the fans, and it's not something that we were ever inclined to do. The grand final should be played in front of supporters if it can be, and I want Victorian footy fans to know that we will be compensated for the agreement that's been reached today. We've added a year to the AFL MCG Grand Final contract that now takes us out to 2059. The Melbourne Cricket Ground's been guaranteed an extra 8 AFL Premiership matches over the next 5 seasons, from 2022 to 2026. More football will be taken to regional Victoria. There'll be a guaranteed 4 AFLW Premiership matches to be played at regional Victorian venues over a 3-year period, starting with the 2021-22 season, and the 2022 and 2023 AFL drafts will be held here in Victoria, given the expectation that this year's event may well be a virtual one. It is, I think, painfully obvious that this is incredibly disappointing for me, for all Victorian football fans, for the government, but that is unfortunately the situation that sometimes this pandemic imposes upon us. It was brilliant to have footy here at Marvel and at the G. For that part of 2021 we were able to, including the 78,000 people we had at Anzac Day, but the circumstances we're in at the moment, with relatively large case numbers, relatively low vaccination levels as against the national plan, and restrictions that the Premier's already indicated will continue beyond this Friday, just made it impossible to play this game in front of a crowd at the MCG 3.5 weeks from now. We held on for as long as we possibly could, but we had to get to a decision point, and unfortunately this is that decision. So I want to thank Gillon and Travis Old and everybody at the AFL for the constructive way that they have engaged with the government. I want to reiterate Gillon's comments. The grand final and footy in general will be back here at Marvel and at the MCG. We can't wait, and I wish the AFL and the 6 remaining clubs in the final series all the very best for the balance of the final series. Now, in terms of questions, do you want to go first with me, or do you want to start with Gil?
Why did it take you so long to see?
Well, as I said, because I wanted to give us every chance. And I know that there were people last week and the week before saying, come on, just, wave the white flag. I wanted to give it every chance. We wanted to see if case numbers would get back to those very low numbers. And unfortunately, that just hasn't been the case. And, I have no doubt that if 2 weeks ago we'd said, look, the grand final's going to Perth, the question would have probably been, why have you given up so early? So, I wanted to give it every opportunity for those numbers to come down, but unfortunately it just hasn't happened in the time frame we would have liked. All right, maybe you want to go to Gil?
Were you talking about John Ralph when you said people were writing stuff last week? Yeah.
And asking about Ross Lyon. What time will the grand final be, or we expect it's more likely to be 12 at the time?
We're working on it. I think, the time difference and the capabilities of that venue, which it's unlikely to be 2:30 Eastern, but we haven't finalised that. We sort of, we only got to being definitive about it in the last 24 hours, and so we'll come back on as soon as we can on that. We just haven't been in a position without an agreement to talk to broadcasters, and to have the right discussions, and I guess the industry a bit to make that decision, and we'll do it quickly.
But unlikely to be a day game, mate.
I think that if you work to, I didn't say that, but if you work to 2:30 or 2:40 that we were going to be, that's 12:30 or 12:40 Perth time. We're not going to play the grand final then, so it'll be later than scheduled, but when exactly we'll work through.
Is the AFL happy to go along with a potential only the vaccinated people only on the ground? Is that thing going to be discussed?
In Perth?
Yes, in Perth, yeah. For the ground there.
We haven't had a discussion about that. I mean, I don't think that's a proposal. It's not what I've heard of. Is that? No.
I just put the question from the AFL standpoint.
I think that's a hypothetical. I think until you have proper supply and a proper communication process, and at some point those discussions will be had. They haven't been had yet, and it's not contemplated for the next few weeks.
A couple of months ago, the West Australian government locked out crowds with just one case. I mean, how much does that play on your mind that would happen again?
Yeah, it plays in my mind. I think it's not. I think that would apply in most states. I think right now, I know people now, we've made the decision around being in Perth. It's clearly relevant in Perth, but it would apply in Adelaide or Tasmania, or, I think there was a Tasmanian game cancelled on one case in about an hour. Well, I think it was Hawthorn Collingwood. So that issue applies everywhere, given the way state politics and the way people are controlling this pandemic, which is quick, dramatic lockdown. So what we won't do is play a game. We won't play a grand final in front of no people. So we'll work through that if that happens. But we know that this government has prioritised the health and safety of its community. It's made the tough decisions. It's it's got tight borders, and we feel we're in safe hands. But we know there's a risk, and if it happens, we'll deal with it.
Why continue with the bite? Why not just march through, given Melbourne and potentially we'll be out of quarantine and won't need quarantine?
I think because you've already declared who's in the grand final, John. It's not quite as obvious because there are alternatives to potentially. I think the answer is because if you're going to play a grand final, you have to invite all of the teams, you have to invite all of the supporters, and actually having an amount of time to get through quarantine to prepare and to do justice to the biggest day in Australian sport. That's just a fact. This is the biggest single day of sport in Australia's calendar, and we're going to do it properly. Perth's going to do it properly, and we're going to lead in properly, and that's the opportunity by playing in West Australia, and that's what we'll do. Yeah, so the team are working with them. They've started those in the last 24 hours. So I know they're very keen to have a parade over there. There'll be I'll look in my council. Yeah, but there'll be a Brownlow event on the Sunday night. Have we announced that? We have now. So there'll be Sunday the 19th, I think it is. Yeah, so we're just freewheeling here. I don't know what I'm supposed to announce and what not, but it's going to be a big week. There's Carbine Club are going to do a lunch over there. I know the West Australian will be doing a lunch. There'll be an AFL lunch on the Friday, the grand final. There's going to be there'll be I think the logistics of a full parade are challenging, but we'll have an opportunity to present the teams, John, if we get them there, and we have that week to prepare, present them to tens of thousands of Western Australians and celebrate this cup that's just so hard fought and won. I mean, we have an opportunity now, after our players, our staff, our clubs, their partners and others have worked so hard. There's going to be 2 lucky teams who make it, and with a bit of luck, we'll have an incredible full house and a proper lead-in, and it will be one of the most hard-fought, celebrated grand final wins by whoever's lucky enough to do that we've ever had, and that's how we're going to do it. We're going to do it properly.
Just on the Brownlow, so that'll be, obviously you're hoping for an event in Perth at Grand Casino at some point with both teams attending, grand final teams attending, etc.
Well, how the teams play into that, we're working on, whether it's, traditionally it's been through the parade. There are some logistical issues like that, but there'll be, we're certainly working on a way that whether teams get presented to the public, and for those who can't get a ticket, and kids and families and others. As I said, there'll be lunches and events and different things through the week. Brownlow on the Sunday night. I think, there'll be a broadcast. There's a physical event in Perth with a integrated into a broadcast around the country. So we've been sort of trying to do stuff in parallel. We've only really been able to have the proper discussions in the last 24 hours. So we're working hard to make sure we now can pin it all down.
The fans in Melbourne who probably got that through the last year, and then potentially we might still have lockdowns next year. How confident are you that they'll get back to 100% crowd at some stage?
We'll get back there, John. I guess I'd say to all Victorians, frankly, not just football supporters. I think. We all resonate. I think I've been living here. We know how hard it's been and how much we miss going to Marvel and the MCG, and frankly, how much we miss community football. And I've got like so many kids who play, and clubs and suburban leagues I follow. We're missing it, but it will be back. This thing will pass. No one's more committed than the people of Victoria to doing the right thing and getting this behind us. And we're getting vaccinated, and we've got a plan out of here. So it will end. It doesn't mean the next weeks and months aren't going to be hard, but this will end, and we will get back to our way of life and our way of life across this country, particularly in this town, is going to the football. Going to men's football, women's football, junior sport, and we'll get back there, and that'll be next year. In what form, whether it's 100% straight away, I don't know, but we will get back and we'll celebrate, you know, how we live and what's great, and a lot of that's going to the footy. Can we come, if we do this, if we do all the footy stuff, and then we'll come back to minutes, is that okay? Yep. Thank you.
What do you go across?
In the next day or two, yeah, a couple of days, yeah. Yeah. I guess I welcomed the tribunal verdict that it was intentional conduct and handing down a sanction. If I'm honest, I find it personally, and I need to be careful, hard to reconcile how it can be intentional conduct that was aggressive, demonstrative and disrespectful. I think was found to be all of those things, and then only be 3 weeks. You know, we asked for 6. These are the facts, and it's at 3. And I'm finding that personally hard to reconcile how it can only be 3 weeks. So I would say to, you know, I guess as the CEO of the league, I'm saying to community leagues and others that I find that decision perplexing, and so I just, you know, I don't think I can say that I thought, well, that I've said enough.
Did the AFL appeal it?
Yeah, I've spoken to the lawyers about our appeal rights, clearly. So they're looking at that at the moment. Just me and Walshy will do it. I don't know. I think roughly like 25 to 30, I think, roughly, yeah. So just to be clear, there'll be 25 to 30 operational people. We'll go over, do 14 days, be there for a week or 10 days, get it done and come back. And, you know, we very clearly understand the rules of engagement in WA, how clear they are about that, our responsibilities to the Western Australian public. There's the amount of people needed to put on this game. We'll do it, and we'll do a great job for, hopefully for Victorians, for all football supporters, and certainly for Western Australians.
You just mentioned before about Yankees. Are we going to see a concern campaign for the AFL vaccination? And it's the NRL launch recently. We've seen some players get vaccinated after the season.
Yeah, at the moment we're going through a process where we are having a very comprehensive communication plan with all of our players, male and female, our staff, and we're doing in specific cohorts. When that's finished, then we obviously will have supply and give a rollout for those who want to, but I think you can feel comfortable that we'll be aggressively pushing and advocating for everyone to get vaccinated, because to John's point, if you want to get back here with full houses, and if you want to save your local coffee shop or your local butcher or all of these small businesses that are suffering, there is only one way out. This is really clear. There is only one way out, because it's mandated by every state government and the federal government now. That's the only way. The way out is vaccination. So that's what we're going to do.
Just one for the good luck, Red Stars, the timeline's been established.
You got an earpiece here.
Will you lobby clubs in regard to 3/4 of support? What's the process now? It's exciting. You've got a timeline.
Well, no, not lobbying clubs. We've got to work through the process, John. So there's 3 options outlined by Colin in the report. I think he's very clear. For those who want to read it. It's an excellent report. And we'll pick up the discussions with all the relevant parties, which include some of the clubs, but you know, obviously clearly with Peter Gutwein and the Tasmanian government about what's possible, and we'll work through that. And the right time, which will be, you know, we've committed that it'll be then done at the latest in time, you know, in line with the club funding deals and the new CBA for next year. We'll put something back to the Presidents, and what form that takes and whatever deal it looks like is to be worked through.
You satisfied obviously what
That's the decision for them and the Tasmanian government, but there's nothing stopping that now. Listen, it was only an hour and a half ago. You've got my view on it. I respect the Tribunal. They do a great job. I find it hard to reconcile where that's at. So I've asked the lawyers for a view on that, and I don't know, tonight or tomorrow. We won't muck around. And you know, I think you don't appeal lightly. So you need to make sure we contextualise. You know, I'll get some advice on that and contextualise it all. And we'll make a decision as quick as we can.
Thanks.
Rachel,
Oh, well, I mean, ultimately these things are always a balance of things. They're a balance of, vaccination numbers, case numbers, and whatever rules might apply about vaccinated persons entering. So, it may well be that next year, in all sorts of settings around the country, proof of vaccination may be a feature of that. So I'm sure those things are being discussed at National Cabinet. I don't think it's as simple as saying, when you're at 80% vaccination levels, you'll have 100% crowds in every circumstance. It'll depend on a range of factors, and there'll always be a public health overlay. But certainly the fact is that the higher our vaccination numbers, the better our chances of having capacity crowds at events like the AFL Grand Final. And that's why at every press conference I've been at, get vaccinated the minute you're eligible. Don't delay and choose, whatever vaccine's available. I took AstraZeneca. I've had both doses. I'm perfectly fine. Get the vaccine that's available now. Well, I'm not the Minister for Grand Final public holidays, but my understanding is yes, the Grand Final public holiday will take place on the Friday before the Grand Final. I'll let the relevant Minister and or the Premier speak to that in more detail at the right moment, but my understanding is yes, it will proceed.
Sorry, Daniel, I know you're Blues up there, but can you think of Melbourne fans who have waited 57 years and they're going to potentially watch this, flag?
I don't have to think about them. I've heard from a lot of them. I've had a number of Melbourne fans call me. And I can understand that, they've got to get through a prelim, but I can understand why, if you've been waiting since 1964, and I think it's been 21 years since they were in the Grand Final, it will be a difficult pill to swallow, the prospect of them potentially winning a flag and not being there. I feel for Melbourne supporters. I feel for, supporters of, all of the remaining Victorian clubs, Bulldogs, Cats. Don't think I've missed anyone, but look, it is very disappointing for football fans. There's no question about it. And as the Minister for Tourism, Sport and Major Events, there's nothing I like less than seeing big sporting events go elsewhere. Like it cuts me to the quick, but that is the situation we're in. Well, look, the Spring Racing Carnival is a bit different. The Spring Racing Carnival, unlike footy, it can easily go ahead with small or no crowds, and that's what happened last year. So the issue for the Spring Carnival is not whether or not it proceeds. It will proceed. The question is whether or not there are crowds and how big they are, and that'll just depend on the epidemiology at the time. I would be hoping that we can get crowds in at the Melbourne Cup and the Cox Plate, and you all remember I got into a bit of strife for the Cox Plate last year, but of course I want to see crowds, but it'll depend on where we're at. I'm not going to comment on the border rules that the West Australian government puts in place, Rachel. That is something that I'm sure that your counterparts in WA can put to mark.
Can I say, I wasn't supposed to mention the Brownlow. So Brian, who's one of the great panickers, so if you guys could just not report it, just delete it off the tape. I wasn't supposed to mention the Brownlow. I don't know why, but I wasn't.
I think you might have been going live, Gil.
But if you can, just help me out. Please. Thank you.
I think we're done. Put the release out.